I want to take some time today on MLK Day to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I think as far as wisdom and leadership goes, he's number one in my mind by a mile. I don't see anybody even close to him. So everybody knows about his historic push for civil rights and voting rights and his accomplishment in that realm. He would be the first to admit that it really wasn't just him. He was the figurehead of a movement that was much larger than any individual person, because no individual person can really reach that level of achievement. He was kind of riding a wave of people who were like-minded and willing to act on it. But one of the things, or many of the things, that people don't discuss nearly as often as the achievements in that realm is everything else. Because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just right about that. He was way ahead of his time in many other ways. So one of the demands that protesters listed for the March on Washington was a minimum wage. In fact, Dr. King said, quote, "Anything less than $2 an hour fails to give all Americans a decent standard of living." Now, for those of you thinking, $2 an hour, that's crazy low. What are you talking about? No. At the time, that was equal to what today would be $15.27 an hour. So back then, he was arguing for a $15.27 an hour minimum wage. So 100% right on that issue, in the sense that he's arguing for a living wage. And we're still fighting that fight today, man. We're still nowhere near a living wage. Today, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, the federal minimum wage, that is, and a living wage is supposed to be about $12 an hour or so. Still haven't gotten there yet. On unionization, he said the following, quote, "We must guard against being fooled by false slogans, such as right to work." Sound familiar? Again, we're getting the same thing today. "Its purpose is to destroy labor unions and the freedom of collective bargaining by which unions have improved wages and working conditions of everyone. Wherever these laws have been passed, wages are lower, job opportunities are fewer, and there are no civil rights. We do not intend to let them do this to us." So back then, he was arguing against union busting, and today we have a lot of union busters all around the country as governors, in state legislatures, in Congress. They're all over the place. In fact, there was a study recently that found that in the so-called right-to-work states, people make $1,500 less per year on average. So it's not really right to work, it's right to work for less. Right to work with no collective bargaining rights. That's what we're really talking about here. It's a horrible thing, and he was onto it all the way back then. On the issue of health care, he said, quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health care is the most shocking and inhumane." Here yet again. Way ahead of his time. Now, of course, since the implementation of Obamacare, we've definitely taken a step in the right direction. However, let's not be fooled here. Obamacare is essentially putting some ointment and a Band-Aid over a gaping, gangrenous wound that is a healthcare system which is for profit. It is a capitalist healthcare system where, when you trace it back, there's always a CEO and a CFO with a couple mansions and a yacht and $1 million plus a year salary that's getting rich off of other people's misery. When you have a for-profit health insurance system, you've made it so that you've incentivized health insurance companies to not pay out on as many claims as possible, because the less they pay out on claims, the more money they have for their profit margin and for their shareholders. So it's a horrible incentive. You have insurance companies trying to weasel their way out of helping people at every turn. So the cancer of the system, the root problem of the system, is still there. That's the way the system functions itself is the problem. You could try to change things as much as you want on the surface, and sometimes it helps a little bit, which Obamacare did, but it's not really fixing the problem. Really fixing the problem would be doing a Medicare for All system, which is everybody's health care is paid for by our tax dollars. Instead of the government taking our tax money and putting it towards random wars that we don't want to be fighting and putting it towards corporate welfare and pork barrel projects, how about we take that money and we put it towards healthcare? And while we're at it, let's put it towards education too. Let's put it towards things that actually go back to the American people, not things that we use to make bombs and then they go overseas to kill innocent brown people. Now, he's still not done, because on the issue of war, he said, quote, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." He also said, "The greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. There is nothing except a tragic death wish to prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war." So on all of these issues, and many, many more issues, he was way ahead of his time. And by the way, this is why he was viewed as very, very, very dangerous to the establishment. Because here we have an organized movement that got the Voting Rights Act and got the Civil Rights Act, but they weren't done yet. No. They had a lot more work to do. They knew they had a lot more work to do. They wanted to raise the minimum wage. They wanted to end the wars. They wanted to bring back strong unions. They wanted to get a universal health care system. So they had all these priorities. And when you have a leader who's such a great figurehead and gives such great speeches and motivates people, and you have the ground troops who are willing to take the time and the effort to put in the work to get their goals achieved, oh, the establishment can't have that. And by the way, if you go back and read a lot of what the establishment said about Martin Luther King Jr., they were scared that he was a communist and he was going to bring in a communist revolution and totally change everything about the system. So they had to have him killed. The way to honor Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy is to continue his work. Notice today there are a lot of people who are supporting him, but how are they supporting him? The cast of the movie Selma, for example, you know what they're doing? It's Oprah and all the actors and stuff. They were walking together, arm in arm. I'm not sure if it was in Selma, but it might be in Selma. But they were basically copying what they did, right? It's an honorable thing to do. And they go, "Oh yes, look at us. We're standing up for a great man in history and a great movement, and this is how we get together on his holiday." Now that is a good thing to do, sure. You know what's better? Let's do another March on Washington. Let's do another March on Washington with more people this time, and let's have our goals be what the rest of his goals were. That's how you honor his legacy. You say, well, Martin was great, but what would he love for us to do if he's not around? Get that minimum wage increase. End all these wars. Bring back strong unions. Let's fight. Let's fight for universal health care. There's nothing that's stopping us now from carrying on. Like, people always look back and go, oh, what a great time that was and what a great achievement it was. Now let's stop and only talk about that one single great achievement that they did. What about the rest of the picture? What about the fact that his vision is not totally reached yet? In many ways, even on race issues, of course, his vision is not reached yet. So the way to really honor his legacy is to continue his work and do stuff that we know he would be proud of. So no more looking back. No more looking back and cheerleading the movement for what it was. It was a great movement, but the way to really honor the movement and the way to really cheerlead the movement is to go forward and carry on the message. This is what we need to remember. Unfortunately, very few people are taking this approach to the situation, but we should start.